Welcome to the Great Things LLC podcast, the show celebrating inspiring people who are making an impact in the world, creating conscious businesses that are in alignment with their own personal values. Each episode shares the wisdom, experience, and intention of those that are following their dream, visionaries that have chosen a different path, found their purpose, and create joy and abundance while helping others. Whether you're already a trailblazer or still searching for your own path, these stories will inspire you towards being the best version of yourself. Welcome to the third episode of the second season of the Great Things LLC podcast. I am truly excited to have my friend and today's guest, Sven Hosford, on. And Sven, it took me 5 years to meet. For the previous 5 years before meeting Sven, his name came up at least 2 to 4 times a month. We ran in the same circles in the Pittsburgh Wellness and Western Pennsylvania area. Sven was the founder and consultant for Peaceburg, managing editor for the Journal of Lifestyle Medicine. He was also the medical director for the Pennsylvania Cannabis Society, and the founder and publisher of Dispense Magazine. And that's actually how Sven and I did meet, was through some of his work in the cannabis industry. And Sven, it is great to have you on the show here. I know this is new for you because in all the things you do, you're also an incredible podcast interviewer. So you're on the other side of the microphone.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable. I'm not sure how I'm sitting with this.
Well,
hey, and you forgot Point of Light too. I was actually, that's how I got started with all this. Was Point of Light magazine started in '94, and so that's almost 30 years ago. And that's really where I became more of the household name, and then I got into all this other stuff.
So the thing is you've been in the health and wellness industry and all around it for a long, impressive career. And what we're talking about today is actually a 4-letter word. It is mold, and mold doesn't come up in the wellness industry probably as often as it should. So I wanted to kind of open up the discussion so you can share your story, how you went from all these things and that critical event that led you to where you're at now with Freedom from Mold and the work you're doing with mold exposure and counseling.
First, let me say, if you want to kill conversation at a party, the topic to bring up is mold. So I will just say, bear with it. It might be good for you to learn about this stuff. But yeah, actually, I was living in about 100-year-old building with a flat roof that always leaked, and a landlord that didn't want to fix anything. And after 5.5 years, I was so toxed with mold that I actually wound up having a heart attack. And I went to the emergency room, and the doctor says, mold doesn't cause heart attacks. I continued to argue. She gave me the hand and said, look, I've been to medical school. Well, this was the moment I've been kind of dreading and fearing, and also realizing might actually happen, was that moment when a medical professional wants to do things are going to cause more harm, and you don't want to do them. And they won't even listen to you. They don't even listen. So I walked out. It was the scariest thing I've ever done. I went off to a naturopathic clinic in Toledo, where I'd been a couple of weeks before. And she hooked me up to all of her electronic gizmos and said, yeah, you've got mold in your body, and your lymph system is, like about the consistency of Jell-O. And so I spent a month there doing all these crazy processes and techniques and things that I never would have ever suspected I would want to do. And that's really the reason I'm alive today. They wanted to treat me in the hospital, they wanted to treat me for a clogged artery. Guy shows up Monday morning, 56 years old, chest pains. Oh, he's got clogged arteries. Well, I didn't. I had a clogged lymph system, and that's what was putting pressure on my heart. So after I got reasonably more healthy, I felt so stupid that I continued to live in a moldy environment, even after I knew there was mold in there, not even realizing how dangerous mold is. And then about 3 months after my episode, a guy named Dr. Mark Hyman, who's the functional medicine director at the Cleveland Clinic, he got taken down by mold numerous times. And he wound up doing the same kind of treatments that I did. Now I'm talking about rectal insufflation of ozone. I'm talking about coffee colonics, which are definitely not a lot of fun. Infrared saunas, hot and cold tubs. And these are the things that squeeze the toxins out of your lymph system, put it into your bloodstream and get it out of your system, or I'm sorry, get it from the blood to the lymph and then out of your system, largely through the coffee colonics. So, right at first I was like, oh yeah, I want to tell everybody about this. And then I realized I don't want to be the mold guy, so I was kind of, flailing around for a bit. And then I stumbled across these guys that said, hey, we're going to get medical cannabis made legal in Pennsylvania. I said, sure, right. And darn if they didn't do it, so we all did it. And then, so I became an expert in cannabis, which is a lot of fun, a lot more exciting, a lot better conversations at parties, I will say, if you say you're a cannabis expert. A lot more money in that.
Yeah. No one asks what strain of mold you have, so for sure. But let me just jump in here a little bit, because I want to go back to the living situation, because we'll get into all the things you've learned. But I think for many, mold, you have the picture of it's like this big furry black spot on the foundation, but it can be hidden. What were some of your, did you have any awareness up to the time of that cardiac event that mold was causing poison, or what were some of the things you noticed or didn't notice in that environment?
Well, that's the tricky part, is that I was having lots of health challenges, and I didn't put it together that they were caused by mold, because when mold gets into your system, it goes in through your nasal cavity and then to your hypothalamus, and then it rests around in your hypothalamus until it finds out the weakest part of your body. And then it goes there and starts to do damage. So during the time I was living in this apartment, I had an aneurysm in my aorta. Not a lot of fun there. I had 3 detached retinas surgeries. Again, not a lot of fun. And numerous other kinds of health challenges, none of which you would think were caused by mold, but basically are. High blood pressure.
No commonality or direction.
It's really not. That's the problem. Is there's no. If you got a sinus infection, like I did have a friend of mine came over for a visit, and for 2 weeks after that, he had sinus infection. So I said, maybe we should look into this mold thing. Maybe it's not as, maybe it's really as dangerous as people say. And so, yeah, the thing is, if you can smell mold, if you can see mold, you are in danger with a capital D.
I'd like to get into this a little bit further, but we'll pick up where you left off, how you move from dispense and moving forward.
Yeah.
But one of the things is mold, one, doesn't present with common or uniform symptoms.
Correct.
You get so many other effects, it's really hard to diagnose. So that's one of the things that make it so difficult. Also, with your experience in the medical profession, a lot of doctors may not be trained specifically in mold.
This is a huge problem, is that doctors are actually taught that mold and the mycotoxins which accompany mold are not dangerous, and that anybody who is showing symptoms, it's all in their head. It's psychosomatic. And I'm reading the Facebook groups and everything, and people are just, they're totally mystified as to what to do when their doctor tells them it's all in your head. There's no physical symptoms. We can't find anything wrong. Well, they don't know where to look. They don't even believe that mold is a problem. So this is a huge problem in general, but especially in the mold community, in any kind of toxic community. They want to jump in and treat symptoms without getting to the underlying cause of things, which could be any number of toxins that are in your environment. And the problem is that once
mold,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, and just want to jump in there that it's also prevalent. There's very few areas in the country that don't have heavy mold unless you're in a very dry, arid climate. You have mold exposures, and especially in construction before a certain year where they were developing the newer materials that are more mold resistant. Old lumber, old animal fiber in the walls, all these things are fuel for mold.
Formaldehyde, yeah. In new construction, you've got formaldehyde off-gassing for about 3 to 4 years. So, yeah, and we live in Western Pennsylvania here. Well, I do. You don't anymore, but it's anywhere east of the Mississippi, you've got mold in your house. If your house is more than 10 years old, there's mold somewhere. Somewhere a window leaked, a roof tile came up, something somewhere, or in your basement. If you can smell mold in your basement, you're in danger. It's right. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And even in the dry climates, if you shut up a house for 3 months, you're going to get mold inside of it.
Moving back to where we kind of jumped off here. So now you've been doing all this work. You've gotten at least a direction and some relief from your work, and then you've started the work with the Cannabis
Society.
Yeah,
that was fun. That was actually a lot of fun. I was the media director, and for this nonprofit, and we had a big part in getting medical cannabis made legal in Pennsylvania. And it's like when I learned the science of the endocannabinoid system, which we all have, and when I learned that mother's breast milk contains a cannabinoid called anandamide, our bodies are built to consume cannabis. We are, period. It's one of the healthiest things you can do. And learning that, it just relieved me of, decades of guilt and shame around having a cannabis habit. And, it was actually my body telling me, this is good for you. You're still alive because of this, not despite this, But yeah,
and that's the alternatives, the alternative wellness piece coming in, where there are natural plants, there are ways to heal and cure your body and to get it back into stasis.
Yeah.
So I think you were going with that on where the cannabis opened you up not only to the experience and the science behind it, but how did that lead you then forward to moving from that industry to where you are today with launching Freedom from Mold?
Yeah, it's another, I'll try to keep it short story. The cannabis industry in Pennsylvania, it's a clown circus. They wrote the laws that all of the owners would be local, or at least half owned by local people. And then the slicky lawyers came in and figured out all these ways around it. So now we have exactly the industry we didn't want when the bill was written. And that is a bunch of the bigger multi-state operators are now buying up all the dispensaries and the grow operations. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not so good. There's a lot of consolidation. There's a lot of sharks and snakes, and backstabbers in the industry. There's a lot of really good people too, doing very good work. I should say that. But I just reached a point where, when the pandemic hit, I couldn't do, I was doing a magazine called Dispense, and did a lot of great podcasts, learned a lot, learned the science. Dispensemagazine.com is still up. There's still lots of podcasts up there. But I just kind of reached a point where I didn't want to do cannabis anymore. I didn't want to be the cannabis guy either, because there's a lot of those cannabis women. And my personality is I'm always trying to do something that nobody else is doing, or not very many people are doing. And so I looked around, and there's a bunch of very good mold doctors, websites, Facebook groups, and all that thing. But a lot of them focus on how to tell if you've been toxed by mold, that sort of thing. I wanted to focus on what are the products, the services, the people that actually keep me alive, that actually help me stay healthy or get healthy. And so we chose with the Freedom from Mold to really focus on solutions. And that's where I saw the biggest need. So that's how I stumbled. And eventually I resigned the fact that I'm going to be the mold guy, or a mold guy. But I really wanted to make it positive and uplifting, and, really provide solid, practical, down to earth solutions for some of the problems that come up once you've been toxed.
So someone who may not be in the best health and haven't found a clear diagnosis, what should they consider looking for or just being aware of that it possibly could be mold exposure?
Well, I think the most practical and first thing you might want to do is to get a mycotoxin test from a company called Great Plains. It's a testing company. And you should be able to get that through any good medical provider. Our friend, Mandy Bapke's, she's a holistic health person. She can get it done. There's a couple of doctors and nutrition people that I know that can get it done. Any doctor can write the script for that. It's about $350, but it gives you the list of all the mycotoxins that are in your system. So it's actually, and I will say this, the science is still way out on this. There's just not enough research. There's not enough, science being done, but it's thought that the mycotoxins are the things that actually cause the problems in your system and not the mold itself. But the problem is when you kill mold, it leaves mycotoxins in your system, in your house, or whatever. So the first thing is to get the Great Plains mycotoxin test. At that point, hopefully you're working with a health provider who can read it and understand it and have some solutions for you. There's a bunch of very good ones out there. There's more every day. There's more serious scientists and doctors talking about mold. But that's probably the first step if you can swing that.
And with any health care relationship, it's probably good to ask your doctor if they've had experience with mold, or if they can recommend, or is there anything specific you should check in with your doctor, or something you can phrase to him that'll kind of key if he's the right, or he or she is the right provider?
Yeah, just ask them what they know about mold. How do they treat mold? I had a PCP that says, I don't have anything, I have nothing to treat you with. Like if you have an active mold infection, they can do something. But if you just have the lingering, simmering effects of ongoing contact, there's nothing they can do. So the first part is just, what do they know? What are their treatments? And if their answer is, then find another doctor. Yeah.
Keep looking.
Yeah, keep looking.
So you've gotten a baseline, you've gotten your healthcare provider. And are there tests for the environment too? Can you?
Oh, yes.
I'm assuming there's a lot of tests for your environment as well.
Yep. A lot of tests. Any good mold remediator would be able to do air tests, and they can run $200-300 as well. And they'll test the air usually in a couple different locations, and then they'll do a test of the air outside, just to see how much mold is actually in your environment around your house as well. And again, that's really, can be very high. I was reading on a weather website that when the mold index, and I think that's what they call it, the mold index is very high, which means 6,000 1,000 mold spores in every cubic yard of air, they recommend do take off your shoes when you've been outside before you enter your house. Otherwise, you're going to drag mold spores right into your house.
So it sounds like some of these basic testing to get the baseline are really not that expensive. I mean, hearing your story, I bet you'd be happy to spend a couple $100 a year or two prior instead of all the doctor's visits and headaches just to rule it in or out.
Right. Well, now the problem is the very first test I did in the basement where I'm living now, they told me that the danger line was at 500 and that it was at 250 in the basement. So according to them, oh, you're not in danger. Well, once you've been toxed, once you've hit your maximum toxic load, you are super susceptible to everything. Everything. I couldn't walk down the laundry aisle at the grocery store after I had the heart attack. So 250 may be safe for most people, and most people's system can handle it, but it might not be for me. And unfortunately, there's no real easy, simple way to determine that. Other than, I just give a little plug for the last podcast I did. There's 3 people run a company they call Exposing Mold, and they practice what they call avoidance. And that basically means take your body and some well-washed clothes and go out and live in a tent in the desert for a couple of weeks, or any non-toxic environment that you're sure is non-toxic. Come back to your house and see how you feel, see how your body reacts. And to learn to use your body as the testing meter to say, this is safe, this is not safe. It's really an interesting way to look at it. And all 3 of these people in Exposing Mold have their own horror stories about, just trying to figure out what they have, why are they sick, all that sort of thing.
So there's a ton of consequences of mold, obvious and not obvious. Some of the ones that you mentioned were brain fog. I think anyone who has unfortunately probably contracted COVID can understand what a brain fog would look like. That virus seems to indicate it. What were some of the really obvious? You say, when you come back in from a clean environment to a toxic loaded environment, what are some of the obvious signs you see? And then what are some of the after effects or not so obvious signs?
Sure. The list is very long, actually. Fatigue is a big one. Chronic fatigue syndrome is now thought by some people to be exclusively related to mold. I personally get light sensitivity, and my visual acuity goes down. So when I can't see things clearly and I walk outside and I have to squint because the sun's out, that's a pretty good sign that I've been toxed. I just had my garage worked on and they pounded a new roof on it. And the first time I opened the door, I realized that all the dust that was up in the roof is now on the floor and all over all of my possessions in the garage. And, for a couple of days, I was upset. Mental health issues are a really big thing. Like, I had never in my life had panic attacks. And I started to have them when I was living in that 100-year-old building. Depression, anxiety, but really mental health issues that are outside your norm. I've worked on myself for a long time, being involved with holistic health. I've tried every technique, I've tried every healing process, supplement, you name it, I've done it. And so I've worked on myself a lot, so I know what my baseline basically is as far as mental health. But when I start feeling depression or anxiety, I don't have anxiety. I don't get anxiety. When I feel that, or I feel real weepy, a real sappy show comes on TV and, I find myself crying. It's like, what is going on? So mental health issues are a really big one. But again, on the physical side of things, it could be really anything that hurts, anything that's inflamed, lymph system that's not moving. And there's a lot of different symptoms for that. Really, there's more than I can even remember on what are the signals, But I think for me, the visual acuity, the fatigue, feeling chronic fatigue kind of symptoms, and the mental health issues are the biggest indicators from my point of view.
So that's a good overview of what someone, may want to look out for. Now, with your Freedom from Mold business and consulting, you're really focusing on people who have already figured out and identified that they've had a mold exposure and are actually in the active process of detoxification and recovery. So I would imagine there's, a lot of protocols, some products, some people doing great things, some services out there. Could you give a little bit of an overview of like what can someone do if they've found out that they've been exposed to mold?
Yeah. Really, the first and most important thing is to get out of the moldy environment. Either you get it remediated professionally by somebody who really knows what they're doing. And we have a great podcast on that. These guys called the Mold Medics, here in Pittsburgh. They give a great overview on the podcast about what to watch out for, how to do it right and so forth. Definitely if somebody shows up with a bottle of bleach, just throw them out. So the other things you can do, like I say, the very first most important thing is to remediate or move where you're living. And then, and this is really hard, is to come to an understanding that everything you own is now covered with mold spores. And the amount of mold toxins that it takes to make you sick is very, very, very small. So, for example, when I had the heart attack, I'd actually moved out of the moldy apartment a week before that. But I brought with me all my futon and bed sheets and hadn't washed them. And a week after I moved out is when I had the heart attack, because I was sleeping and breathing moldy bed sheets. So get into a clean environment. Learn that the amount that it takes now to make you sick in any way or to create symptoms could be very, very small. I mean, we're talking about somebody walks into one of your friends goes to a moldy apartment, and 8 hours later comes to your house, and the mold that's still in their hair sets you off. It can be a very, very small amount. So have an awareness of those kinds of things. And you have to then become aware of everything in your environment and pay very close attention to what's happening in your body. How do you feel right now? What's your mental state? Is there any pain anywhere? All that sort of thing. The other things that I think are really important are that you get inside of an infrared sauna as often as you can, because that's one of the quickest and healthiest ways to get the mold out of your system. Learn to do coffee enemas on your own, or find some place that does coffee colonics. Getting your GI system cleaned out is very, very important. GI problems can be a symptom of mold exposure.
Like many things, it starts in the gut to get the system balanced.
Exactly.
Because mold is it creating inflammation? What's in the body's got to be going haywire trying to to wipe it out. And if your gut balance isn't out, I could imagine it'd be near impossible to evacuate it if it's not a good gut balance.
Exactly. So saunas, the coffee colonics. I bought myself one of these little rebounders, little mini trampolines. They call it, the brand I have is a Celicizer. And what it's designed to do is you just do a little bounce, for 5 or 10 minutes. And what that does is it gets the lymph system moving. And you really need to have your lymph system moving if you want to stay healthy. So it's like an awareness of all those kinds of things. And for example, keeping your sinuses clear. When I wake up in the morning and it's all clogged and I can't breathe, well, I have different things I use to clean the sinuses out and make sure I'm breathing healthy, because that's the first place they go. So there's a product called X-Lear. It's a little spray that you put up your snoot. Another really good tool to have is a neti pot.
Yeah.
The little clay pot you get in any health food store or yoga studio, basically. You put a little salt water in that.
It's not just good for mold, but I mean seasonal allergies.
Oh yeah, pollen, all that stuff. Yeah, clears it out.
Yeah, I used to think that thing was a really weird invention, and I didn't do it right the first couple times. But once you get the hang of it, it's delightful. Feel like a whole new person, and it's a simple, natural, easy cleaning and keeping any of those infections from setting in.
The yoga people that I bought mine from, they say it's just like brushing your teeth. You get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you clean your nasal cavity, and get on with your day. There's another product I haven't tried yet, but I've had high recommendations for, called Navage. It's basically a neti pot on steroids. It puts it in one nostril and pulls it out of the other nostril, and then you spend 20 minutes or so, clearing your sinuses out. But the doctor I'm going to right now just swears by it. He said it's absolutely essential. So good nasal sinus hygiene is super important. Like I say, just to have an awareness. And it's difficult because, so many people that I've dealt with or I've seen on the Facebook groups, they're so depressed. They're so beaten down. And then, their doctor tells them it's all in their head. And then eventually their friends and family don't want to hear about mold anymore, and can become very abusive even. And you may find that the toxins in your life are the people that are surrounding you, and you have to basically ghost some people to get them out of your life, when possible. If somebody's causing you more distress and you feel more anxious and more depressed after you talk to them, don't talk to them anymore. And this could be really difficult because that could be family, could be your loved one,
and I think that's where I've seen you go with the Freedom from Mold, because it is an isolating experience. One, it's not recognized. It's a long-term, usually, in its diagnosis. So where I've seen you bring your brilliance forward is actually in providing some of the solutions. Now you work with people one-on-one to help coach them through and walk them through and share your experience. Yeah. What are some of the other things you're doing with Freedom from Mold at this point?
Well, I'm working to get some more products and services into the mix. I've done 6 podcasts so far. I'd like to do a bunch more. One of the problems is these people who deal with mold are so busy, because there's so many people that are waking up to the fact that they're not healthy. I think that most important thing I can do is the one-on-one coaching, because when we really get into it, and just to have somebody that will listen to you and believe you is a huge thing for a lot of people suffering from mold. And then if I give them practical advice, practical, ways to, like a neti pot is like $15, and that's essential to do every day. But just like getting people to that level of awareness is really the biggest thing. And there's so many,
because that took you years. It took you years to develop that level of awareness, and
I'm still learning.
Good, any good coach will bring you forward and shorten that cycle to recovery, because you don't have to make the same mistakes.
Exactly.
So you're helping people bring forward, and you're starting to offer some products and growing your network. Do you see a lot more? more of these mold mitigation, mold services coming available? Is this a growing industry, or is it
Yeah,
still relatively unknown?
it's a huge industry, but I have to say, from what I've seen, probably 90% of the people in the remediation business are not doing it correctly. And I don't want to say they're all shysters. A lot of them may think they're doing it correctly. I met a guy the other day. He wanted to come on the podcast, and he does a spray. The mold medic guys call it spray and pray. You spray the stuff, and then it kills all the mold in the air, but it doesn't kill the source of the mold. It doesn't kill the mycotoxins. It doesn't remove the mycotoxins. Doesn't get behind the walls where a lot of these molds are coming from. So if somebody says, "Hey, we'll just spray this stuff and then everything will be fine," no, it won't. My mom had dementia the last few years of her life, and when they went into her home, the mold levels were off the chart, and they did the spray and pray. And I went in a few weeks later to get some of my stuff out, and I had a headache within 30 seconds, and I couldn't stay more than 10 minutes. That's the biggest thing. Really, you want to make sure your remediator knows what they're doing. And the thing is, you can go to two different doctors, two different remediators, and they'll tell you two different things, or five different things if you go to five of them. How do you know what's true? How do you know what's right? And a lot of times the science is just not in, or the science shows something, but nobody wants to pay attention to that. Like this connection between chronic fatigue and mold. Doctors, scientists don't want to know about it. They don't want to touch it.
You've created Freedom from Mold and have been helping a lot of people. So Freedom from Mold really starts with someone mainly who has found out that they have had mold exposure.
Yeah.
What are you doing for someone in that situation?
Well, the first thing is I want to help them understand. I want them to believe and understand the things that I believe and understand. And that's a lot of things. Also knowing, just teaching people what kind of products to use, what kind of products not to use, what kinds of questions should you be asking. I've been a journalist my entire life. I started out as a Navy journalist at the age of 19. And I've been interviewing people that long. I've been asking questions that long. So I appreciate you saying how, I'm such a good podcaster. I think I am too. But I want people to be confident in understanding the signals that their body is teaching them. I want people to learn how to read those signals. I have this thing I say, your body is much smarter than you are. And if you learn to listen to your body, if you learn to pay attention to your body, it can teach you more than any number of podcasts, frankly. But it's really about being confident in the ability to make decisions about your health. When I was in that emergency room and the 30-year-old doctor said, "Look, I've been to medical school," the comeback I should have had was, "Well, I've been in this body for 56 years and I know it better than you do," which is the right answer.
In every case, body. Almost.
every case, you know your body better than anybody else. But a lot of people will be swayed into believing something because a doctor says it. Well, just because a doctor said it doesn't make it true. They may.
Right. I've heard it was great advice I was giving, and they said doctors and lawyers and accountants can only be as strong as their clients. And there is some truth in that, where you have to trust and respect the education and the training they have, but you also have to trust and put your own thoughts and importance and values forward. And you can move on if you don't find a practitioner that's supporting your belief system or concerns.
Right. That's really, really important. And it's true what you say, that they can only be as strong as their client. But it's also true that if you're going to a doctor and he won't listen or she won't listen to you, it's time to find another doctor. It's really prevalent throughout the medical profession that they ask the questions they want to ask. They're looking for specific answers. Anything else, they just toss away. So when I went to a cardiologist, because, that was the process, you got to check to see that your ticker's okay. And they couldn't find any clogged arteries. The cardiologist had no curiosity about the month I spent in the naturopathic clinic. He didn't want to know anything about it, didn't want to know any of the treatments, how dramatic and exceptional and things I learned about, didn't want to know any of that. And this is a cardiologist who was a little older than me, but was pasty white, body like the Pillsbury Doughboy, hunched over, glasses, totally out of shape, totally unhealthy. And he's going to tell me about my cardiological situation, and he doesn't even listen to me, So it goes both ways. You got to find a doctor that will listen and actually pay attention.
Right. Well, there's a lot of things that are coming up for you. So I'm going to share the link to Freedom from Mold. If you are curious, you can reach out to Sven there. A lot of good products, services.
Facebook we have group. A Facebook group and a Facebook page. And so you can always reach me on that.
So if you have concerns, or if you know someone who may have been or is struggling with mold exposure, I definitely suggest getting in touch with Sven. Yeah. All his contact information will be here in the description. You can find him at freedomfrommold.com. Sven, I just want to thank you again for being a guest and a good friend for so many years. Is there anything in closing you want to share with the audience? Any words of wisdom?
No, as far as the mold goes, just if you think you have a problem, you probably have a problem.
Good. So listen to your intuition, listen to your body, exactly. And look around the environment. Sven, thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh.
And we'll be listening to your podcasts.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button right now. Stay tuned and check out the channel for other interesting and informative videos.